Federal investigators are looking into how the FAA approved Boeing's 737 MAX jet after similar software issues were found in two deadly plane crashes involving the plane. Chris Van Cleve reports.
We join the world with heavy hearts in grieving.
After offering his condolences to victims of the two Boeing 737 MAX crashes, CEO Dennis Muhlenberg reiterated his company's commitment to safety in a recorded video.
When an accident happens, for any reason, we focus relentlessly to determine why.
In addition to a new software update, Boeing will update training requirements for the 737 MAX. Captain Dennis Tazier has flown the MAX for American Airlines. He says pilots want a role in what comes next.
We want our experts in whatever simulator you can find so that we and our pilots can feel confident that we have all the information.
But questions remain about the relationship between Boeing and the FAA. Federal authorities have told employees at Boeing and the FAA to retain documents relating to the plane's approval process, which by design relies on manufacturers like Boeing to self-police that they've met FAA requirements. Scott Brenner, a former associate administrator at the FAA, says the agency does not have the resources to certify aircraft without the help of the manufacturer. But on some level, the FAA is taking Boeing's word for a lot of this.
They are taking Boeing's word, but Boeing is also presenting data to prove their word.
As far back as 1993, the Government Accountability Office warned FAA's certification staff were falling far behind industry in technical competency, in part because of delegating to manufacturers. Former NTSB Chairman James Hall.
We need to wake up the regulators, and we need to put aviation safety first.
Mike Slack joins us now from Austin, Texas. He's an aviation attorney and a licensed pilot, as well as a former NASA engineer. So, Mike, critics say that the FAA was just too cozy with Boeing and there should be a bigger oversight role. Do you think that's a fair concern?
I think that's a fair concern. We've always seen the FAA defer to manufacturers, defer to the operators such as airlines. But this seems to be a singularly disconcerting circumstance. The fact now that the Secretary of the Department of Transportation is asking the Inspector General and not the FAA to conduct basically what amounts to a certification or airworthiness review of this MAX 8 points to the lack of confidence in the FAA.
So what exactly is the FAA process for certifying a plane, and what role does Boeing play in that process?
Great question. There's two very different tracks for certifying an aircraft. There's on a clean sheet design that is a brand new aircraft, the manufacturer must go through what's called type certification, which is an original process. It involves a lot more scrutiny from the FAA as opposed to the delegated authority that we've heard about in connection with the MAX 8. So if it had been a complete new type certificate, as was discussed by Boeing in 2010 and 11, it would have been much more comprehensive and much more direct oversight by the FAA. Here, Boeing opted for a supplemental type certificate, which in essence means an incremental or a modest change from model to model from the original type certification, which was almost 50 years ago. So in that circumstance, there's expected to be less direct oversight by the FAA and more certification activities and responsibilities handled by the manufacturer under the delegation of authority from the FAA to the Boeing employees.
So we've heard these similarities in the two crashes involving the 737 MAX 8. The safety feature, which everyone knows as the MCAS, is suspected in playing a role. I'm just curious what your understanding of how it may have contributed to the crashes.
Well, first of all, the question is, why did the aircraft need this system? And so the initial question from an engineering standpoint, as I see it, is what was different about this aircraft that warranted this special automated system that supposedly helped the pilots fly the aircraft during its powered climb. Now, what we believe has happened with the MCAS system is that it's a background system in that it's there to engage when it senses that the aircraft is in an unsatisfactory pitch attitude, usually too high of a nose upward movement. The concern that the system is trying to address is inadvertent stalling of the aircraft during powered climb. So what we're learning about the MCAS system is the system started activating, and apparently, according to reporting, the system is far more powerful in the amount of control it can exert over the aircraft controls, contrary to what the pilot may be doing, as well as the accuracy of information being fed into the system by the angle of attack sensors. What has resulted apparently in both crashes is that the system, when the pilots resist it or turn it off, try to disable it, resets itself and goes again, and is in essence resetting itself and re-engaging and overriding the pilot's input, making the aircraft continually pitch up then pitch down. And the amount of force that is being delivered by the elevators is apparently much greater than what everyone originally understood was associated with the system.
Well, I've never heard it explained that way. It makes so much more sense the way you put it. Mike Slack, I want to thank you very much for joining us.